Hi, welcome to RCKicks. On today's show, where we finally get back round to a car that I bought new in box the second it came out, and then I've spent 6 months just staring at the box, and that's this, the B7 racing buggy from Team Associated. I know, the unboxing for this, I checked it today, was about 5.5 months ago, so I'm really sorry. Things have been manic, we've been doing loads of other stuff, but the B7 has finally come to the top of the list for a few reasons. One, I'd cleared off a few other builds. Two, I was kind of waiting for the B7 to kind of settle down, as in that it had a few bumpy issues at the beginning of it that have now been sorted out, or we know how to work around it. So there was that. Also, Willspeed was kind enough to contact me and say, hey, now you're doing a B7, we have a load of really cool upgrade parts for it. So this is going to be sponsored by Willspeed. So I've got lots of beautiful upgrades to put on it. So the plan is, in this episode, we're going to build up the chassis, take a look at all the parts, put a few upgrades on it. I've still got some other upgrades that are coming for it that are not going to be here in time to build it. That was another reason I was pushing it out. Team Associated dropped a short chassis for the B7. I think it's 4mm less. And being that I run on a very tight carpet track, when I upgraded my B6.4 to the shorter wheelbase, it really helped. So I wanted to do the same again without having to strip the whole buggy down to swap over the chassis. Now, I purchased it from CML, I don't know, about a month ago, and it said that it was going to come in this week, and now it's not, and there's no date on when it's going to be coming, so I can't put it off any longer. So we're building the B7. I'm just going to have to go back later on and strip it all down to move the chassis over. Also, I'll probably end up putting titanium screws on this one, and there might be a few other upgrades that I'll add down the line as we start to dial the buggy in. Anyway, right, let's crack on. I've laid everything out, so let's get this beautiful race buggy built. Right, let's kick off this build, and the first thing we go straight into is an upgrade. Yep, bag one, step one, we kick off with the steering. Now there's two upgrades you can do for this. There's the steering bridge, and then there's the steering bell cranks, as you can see in the top left hand corner. Now, I decided to upgrade this. I did it on my B6.4 previously, and I felt it tightened up the front a little bit more. Now, one thing you need to pay attention to is the steering bridge has 4 bearings and 2 washers. Yeah, they play an important part later on, as I have no idea what happened to mine. And you can see I've got them there. I've just put them on the manual out of the bag. No idea what happened to them. But in the manual for the plastic kit bridge, you just put the bearings on each side, and that's basically it. In the upgrade, you put a bearing on one side, then you put the bush in, and then you put the bearing on the other side. If you leave them out, like I did, what happens when you build the steering is the actual bridge, or the rack, whatever you want to call it, slides up and down, and you don't want that, which is what I found out at the end. But I'm telling you at the beginning because I made a mistake. Now, obviously, building a racing buggy is nothing like building a shelf queen. Everything will rattle loose, so you've got to make sure everything is tightened down and Loctite up. Otherwise, halfway through a race, something random will fall off. Yes, now obviously you don't need to rush out and buy every upgrade known to man as soon as you've got your car. You can build it kit spec stock and then take it racing, and then over time, as you get used to the buggy, start to look at where you can improve the car's performance and then upgrade accordingly. Now, having my B6.4 and then now building the 7 to run on the same track, I've kind of got some ideas of the upgrades that I've done in the past that I felt added value and others that didn't. One thing I was always looking for was to get more weight over the front, as I like to have a very sharp turn in on my car when I'm driving it. Now, Willspeed have done a few weight options that you can put on the front of the chassis, so I'm looking forward to see how they improve the handling. Now, the first Willspeed upgrade I'm going to be fitting to the car is the front aluminium ball stud mount. Now, this is made of T6082 aluminium, or aluminum, depending on what part of the world you're in. Now it has extra link positions, it's more durable obviously, yet lightweight. So I weighed them and it's 17.64 grams for the upgrade, and the kit plastic version is 11.53 grams. So basically you're adding 6.11 grams to the nose. Now for me, adding that extra strength to the front of the car is probably a good thing, and also a little bit of weight over the nose again is going to help my turn in. Now the next Willspeed upgrade that I'm doing is the front bulkhead. Now I have a few of these, but the one I'm actually going to fit now is a 0 degrees 316 stainless. It has a wider cross section to improve durability. Also, it's 30.3 grams. Yeah, a lot of weight. Putting that into context, the kit alloy one that comes with it is 8.77 grams. So it's a big amount of additional weight over the nose. Now Willspeed do a whole variety of front bulkheads. They do a W3054, which is a 7075 aluminium. Now that one is 10.62 grams, making it much closer to the kit one. Now I'm going to try the stainless one first, as having that extra 21.26 grams on the nose, I've always been trying to chase more weight over the front, so I'm going to try it. Now, if I find out that I've got too much weight on the nose, what I'll do is I'll change back to the 7075 aluminium one and see how that performs. Next, we move on to bag 2, step 2. There's an 11 gram kit weight to add to the chassis. Also, we've got to fit the battery foams, and the side rails need to go on. Now another Willspeed part that I fitted, that for some reason I don't have the footage of, is the stainless under servo weight mount. Now I fitted that as 24 additional grams on the front. So if we go back and look at the whole extra weight that I've added, the stainless bulkhead was 21.26 grams, but that's only 12.49 over the kit one. Then we had the ball stud mount, that was 6.11 grams extra over the kit. Then the aluminium plate that comes in the kit, which was 11.5 grams. The stainless under servo weight, which is 24 grams, gives us a total additional weight on the nose of 54.1 grams. Now I know what you're thinking, why are you putting so much weight over the front? And yes, until I drive it, I don't necessarily know if I've gone too far, but I'm trying to get it to balance out at a 50-50 weight distribution. Now, Team Associated do a steel plate, which is 33 grams. On its own instead of the 11 grams, or you can get the carbon one. So we'll just have to wait and see. One thing I really like about this is that it gives me so many tuning options that if I find the nose is too heavy, it's easy. There's a good few choices of where I can remove that weight, where I can add the weight. Well, we'll just have to see when we take it to the track. Right, now we move on to bag 2 step 3, which is fitting the servo. Now I use the Reef 299-LP low profile servos in my race buggies. I find they're very strong and very fast, as I crash a lot. Now one issue I did have was with the kit mounting servo bracket, whatever you want to call it. The way that the Reef cable comes out, it didn't actually clear the servo mount, so I had to Dremel it down a little bit to take pressure off of the cable, but apart from that it went in fine. Team Associated do an optional alloy servo mount bracket, whether you need to go to that or not. This is quite a substantial one, so I can't see the servo moving around. Also, I don't know whether the Reef servo would work with the alloy surround mount, or you'd have to modify that just like you do the kit one. Fitting the servo is super simple. There's just 2 bolts that go through the bottom of the chassis and hold it in place very firmly. One issue that I did have is that the Willspeed optional stainless under servo weight really limits the actual servo horn that you can use. Clearance is super tight, so I had to remove the one I used previously. As you can see around the bottom, you need to have really a round servo horn. The one I had previously kind of squared off at the bottom and it actually impacted it. So to make sure it's nice and clear, you got to get the right servo horn. Well, it turned out that the servo that works with the Willspeed under servo weight was too long and then it hits the bulkhead, so I had to kind of hack it to make it work. Personally, I would recommend just getting the Team Associated alloy ones. It's super tight around the whole steering mechanism, so trying to find exactly the one that's going to work is going to be a bit of a challenge. Right, now we've moved on to bag 2, stage 6, where we're putting the front arms in and the pivot pins. More Loctite to the rescue. It amazes me how much you use on a race buggy, and then you take it out and drive it around a few laps, and then you always find something that rattles loose. Right, we now move on to bag 2, stage 7, where we're going to fit the front bumper and then we're going to put the front tower together. Now, if you're going to be taking it racing quite a lot, one thing that you probably want to do is glue the edges of all your carbon to stop them from shearing off if you flip the buggy, or chipping or cracking. I tried it once with super glue and it came out okay, so it's not as difficult as you think. Now, this kit does come with tower protectors, so clipping them into place, really nice, very smart indeed. There's one for the rear as well. Now, I know what you're thinking, he's using an electric screwdriver. Yes, I do actually use them, but I only use them on certain types of bolts, very long bolts usually, as I don't like to finish off with an electric screwdriver, as you're never quite sure how tight you've got it, and I don't want to round things off or break anything. So I tend to just use them if the bolts are very long. Now we move on to bag 3, step 1, and then also I fitted Willspeed caster blocks. They're made of 7075 aluminium. There's a couple of options available in +2 or +4 configuration. Now, with modern buggies, there's so many different configurations you can set these up. I'm not really going into a lot of detail on how I'm setting up mine. Now, I'm building it to run on a very tight carpet track with not massive jumps. Obviously, if you're running on AstroTurf outside, you're going to set this up completely differently. Now the front's starting to come together, and you'd think now we'd move on to doing the tie rods, but we don't. We actually move on to the rear of the car to put the rear lower arms in. Now this is where it all started to go a bit wrong when they brought out the B7. The actual C block and the pins on the rear of the car ended up being a bit of an issue, as the rear pivot pins were too short, and also the C block had a little channel cut out of it, so when you hit the rear wheel it put too much pressure on the shorter pin and actually damaged the C block. So I'm going to upgrade both of them. I have optional longer pins, so that's going to fix one aspect of it, but I also have the Willspeed upgrade block to fit as well. Right, now we move on to bag 5, step 1, which is where we're going to build up the diff. Now this is obviously a gear diff. Now I'm going to fit just 2 of the planetary gears, whatever you call them, as I want the car to rotate because I'm running on a very tight carpet track. Now I did have issues with my B6.4 with the diff leaking. So I've actually got some green slime, which I'm going to try and use to hopefully stop this diff from doing the same thing. Now, Team Associated included the alloy diff cover in this kit, whereas the B6.4, it was an upgrade. I did upgrade my B6.4 to have the alloy cover and it still leaked. So make that what you will, but hopefully this is now not going to leak using the green slime. Now, as I'm only running 2 planetary gears, it's going to put a little bit more pressure on the plastic cross, whatever you want to call it. So I see that Team Associated do 92322, which is a 2-gear diff cross pin set. So I'm going to purchase one of those, as I don't want the plastic one to shatter inside the diff. So I'll do that as an upgrade down the line. So I'm going to make my next silly mistake, and can you guess what it is? Yeah, if you're eagle-eyed, you might notice that that's not 100,000 oil, that's 10,000 oil. So yes, I've put 10,000 CSD oil in my diff. Yeah, so I had a quick look, and yeah, sure enough, I found some. I do have some. I've just ordered a load of replacement oils as I was running a bit low. At the same time, I've just gone online now and I've ordered the alloy pins. So when I go back into the diff to change out the oil, I'll also upgrade the diff cross to the metal ones before I go racing. They should be here in a few days. Yeah, anyway, moving on. So that's the diff built up for now. We'll come back to it in the future video, so we'll brush that under the carpet. Anyway, now we move on to bag 6, step 1, where we're going to build up the gearbox. Now, Willspeed have an upgraded idler gear set. Now, these are Peak high performance polymer. Now, they've redesigned them. Not only have they changed the material, but they've also changed the bearings in them. They've made them smaller. They now take 5x9x3s. The idea is to increase the material thickness thickness so that the strength and durability increases. Basically, you put them in and you can totally forget about them. Now, another big issue with the B7, especially the early ones, is the actual gearbox housing. When it was made, the actual mounting points are slightly off. So what I was told as a good way to get around this is when you do up the actual bolts that hold it together, don't do it too tight. Leave a small little gap so that when you mount it to the chassis, it will give it a chance to move slightly and then you nip it up afterwards. Apparently that helps to get everything to line up a bit better. To help deal with this issue, Willspeed have produced another part. What they've done is they've made a full brace D-block, but they've incorporated the D-block and the anti-roll bar mount into a single billet aluminium part. This allows the D-block to attach to the transmission case in 2 places. This helps avoid alignment issues with the original component. This part is made of 26082 aluminium. Consolidating the 2 parts into one was a really clever idea. Also improves the strength and durability of the rear end of the car. So that's another step and another Willspeed upgrade installed. Now, as you can see, a lot of these upgrades are reliability and strength, and that's perfect for when you're going racing, as what you really don't want to do is keep breaking your buggy. The stronger it is, the kind of more reliable it is. Now, I have to say the B6.4 was an absolute tank. I don't think in the whole time I had it, I broke a single thing. Now, it's not as easy as just upgrade everything to metal. What happens is you end up breaking something much more complicated that's harder to change. So looking at the front end as I have it now, it looks like the weak part is going to be the arms themselves. Now, I'd rather break an arm than a bulkhead any day. Right, we now move on to bag 6 step 3, where we're going to fit the rear ball stud mount. Now, the one that comes in the kit is alloy, but Willspeed do a upgrade for this. It's a +2 rear link mount made of T6082 aluminium. Now, this has the +2 raised geometry to avoid using multiple washers. If you look at the standard kit version, they actually ask you to put in 2 washers to raise the ball studs. But personally, I'd put this one down as a luxury more than a necessity. But it is a lovely bit of kit. Yes, I know I'm a sucker for a bit of blue bling, and look at that. Yeah, stunning. Whoa. Right, we're finally getting somewhere. Now we just got to fit the diff cover, put in the bolts, tighten it all down, and then we can drop it into the chassis. Now, I have seen online a few diff houses that are all machined in metal, but between you and me, I'm hoping that Willspeed is going to drop a chassis and diff housing so that I can upgrade this. So if you feel you want to email them saying, hey, if you got a B7 chassis upgrade, that would be good, because I really want one, and hopefully they're going to do one. I think they are, but maybe we just need to nudge them a little bit more. Right, now we move on to bag 6 step 4. We're going to fit the motor mount. Now, I have looked, there is a titanium shaft screw that I may get. Also, there is lots of motor mount options available. Team Associated do them, and also Willspeed do a carbon one if you're going to run in the stock class. Personally, the kit comes with an alloy one, so I don't see why you would really upgrade to the Team Associated ones, but it's available if you want to spend the cash. Now, I see Team Associated offer 2 slipper pads, the LCF slipper and the normal one. So does anyone know what the difference between the 2 is? I had a quick look, but I couldn't seem to find much info on it. If you know, comment below, let me know. Right, let's get this tower built and then bolted to the diff housing. After that, we've got to build up all the turnbuckles. Oh, I hate doing turnbuckles. And then we can put it in the chassis. And then finally, we're starting to have what looks like a race buggy. Then we've got to build up the suspension, throw on some tyres, get some electronics in it, and bring it to life. Still quite a bit to do then. Right, let's just bolt up the wing mount and then we can attach it to the chassis. I keep saying that, but we just don't seem to be getting there, do we? Right. Now, after building up a B6.4 and now the experience of building the B7 definitely feels more technical. I can't really put my finger on it, but the actual design seems to be more complicated. I wouldn't say complicated in building it. I mean, just in the way they designed it and how everything sort of fits together. It just seems more refined, if that makes any sense. Now after fitting the diff housing, I noticed my rear arms had a lot of slop in them, a good mil pretty much, but it was the same on both sides. So I re-shimmed them up and they are perfect. They're not binding, but they're not moving. Now I noticed mine were the same on both sides, but some people have been reporting that they were getting binding on one side and it was loose on the other. And obviously that's because of the diff housing mounting holes being slightly off. But I shimmed both sides exactly the same and I got the same results. Right, now we can move on to doing the hubs. Now obviously Team Associated have some hub upgrades options available for you. One that interests me a little bit is the high roll center hubs. This is for high traction carpet tracks. So I'm tempted to try some of those, but apparently they also allow you to use the FT universal drive shafts, but I couldn't seem to find any information on that at the time of the recording of this video. Right, now we're on bag 7, step 2. We're going to build up the drive shafts. Pretty straightforward. Slap on some molly, slide in the cupola, attach it and drop the pin in. No fiddly spring clip on this one, the actual bearing is what holds the pin in place. Next to go on is the pins for the hex and then the hexes themselves. And then we can drop the hubs into the lower arms. Now I don't know if it's my imagination, but every time I put in a screw into this plastic, it seems to be a lot stiffer than what I remember of the B6.4. So I don't know if Team Associated have changed the composite plastic makeup or whether it's totally in my mind. So that's pretty much the rear end done, and now, well, we can't put it off any longer. We have to turn our attentions to the turnbuckles, starting with the front upper. Yeah, I didn't put lots of footage in because basically turnbuckles are turnbuckles. Don't forget to grease the actual threads as it will make your life much easier when you're trying to adjust them down the line. But there you go, that's them all done. I wish it was that simple in real life. There's the rear ones just fitting the upper rear. And then we're getting really close. After this, well, we've got to do the shocks. Now the Buggy feels very premium and I'd love to know what it's like up against a Team X-Ray 2024. Maybe that's something I'll look into later in the year. Now it doesn't tell you in the manual, but one thing I always do is I always lubricate the shock housing threads because it just makes life so much easier when you're adjusting them when they're built. Otherwise you get quite a lot of friction sometimes, and if you're not careful, you go to adjust them in a rush and you overdo it and actually unscrew the body from the cap. Now there's quite a few parts that go in the neck of the shock, so make sure you put them in the right order, but also the right orientation, as some things, if they're round the other way, are definitely going to cause you issues. Also, I'm using green slime here to hopefully stop the shocks from leaking. I must admit my B6.4 shocks never give me any problems at all, so hopefully I'm going to see the same here. So we're on bag 9, step 3, where we're putting the eyes on the bottom of the pistons. Now I've built them stock apart from one thing I've changed. I've changed the rear piston bore size from 1.9, which comes with the kit, to 2.0. As I'm no RC pro driver or setup guru, I tend to work off a pro setup sheet as my baseline and then work from that. That's what I did for my B6.4 and my PR Racing SB401, so I'm going to carry on doing it as it seems to work for me. As for my oil choices, I went 35 or 400 CST in the front, or 32.5 in the rear, which is 375 CST. This is just a baseline to get me started. Obviously, I'm going to have to change these as I go. After building lots of vintage shocks, these are a breeze. Obviously, they have the breather at the top, so getting rid of the trapped air is super easy and getting them all exactly the same and very consistent. Now Willspeed sell and supplied me with a range of springs to try. I went with red on the front and blue on the rear, but obviously I will adapt them as I run the car and to see how the car behaves. One thing I really liked about these springs is the top and the bottom have like serrated edges on them, so it stops them rotating and holds them in place better. So that's the front ones. Then what we're going to do is fit the rear ones, get some wheels and tyres on it and see how it sits. Now you're never quite sure until you get the car on some wheels how the shocks feel, but I'm happy to report that I think this is a good place to start. It does feel quite damped, maybe a fraction softer than I'd like it on the rear, but until we drive it we just don't know. But there you go, that's a chassis ready to go. Let's just put some wheels on it, Check out these wheels. What do you think? Different, huh? Gorgeous colours. Really like them. Picked them up from Disco Discs. It's a small startup company. Highly recommend go check them out. They do fabulous colours. You can also find them on eBay as well. And it's a great way to make your buggy stand out at the track. Right, now the chassis is built, it's time to put some electronics in it. But just before that, I'm going to do another upgrade from Willspeed. I'm going to fit some carbon battery stays. Yeah, who loves a bit of carbon? I know I do. Right, I had the electronics already. This is what I had in my B6.4. So I'm basically just going to put it back in this. Now I'll probably upgrade this down the line to the Corsa fancy ESC motor that I have in my PR Racing SB401 and my YZ10R. I just love it. They're super punchy, they run cool, they're very easy to work with, the app is gorgeous, but you get what you pay for. So my plan is I'll probably stretch next month to get new electronics for this buggy as well. That way I'll have the same electronics in my B7, 2-wheel drive, PR Racing 4-wheel drive, and my YZ 4-wheel drive vintage. So there you go, that's phase one of the Team Associated B7. And what's my first thoughts? Well, compared to the B6.4, it does feel a bit more technical, a little bit more of an advancement. But I did hear that the B6.4 was easier straight out the box versus the 7. You had to put a little bit more effort into dialing it in. But I guess we'll just have to find out when we take it to the track in the next episode. So it's now fully alive, but we still got work to be done. Now I've got to paint up all the body. I've actually got two bodies for this. I've got the Willspeed body and I've also got the kit body. So I'll have to see which one I end up painting up. I don't know. Well, I'll figure it out in the next episode. So you better stay tuned to find out on that one. And then we're going to take it racing for a shakedown, see how it performs in its kind of current form. Yes, I've got to go back and sort out the diff. I've got a few more upgrades. I managed to get the diff pins, so I will go back in and change out the wrong oil and then put those pins in as well. Also, which I don't think I covered in the video, I did make a big mistake where I lost the two bushes that go inside the bridge of the steering. I can't remember now, the video is quite long. So I've ordered replacements, so they'll be here in time for me to take it racing as the bridge kind of wobbles up and down. So don't make that mistake like I did. Apart from that, just very simple, silly mistakes. The one that the kit definitely has, well, this is an early kit. I got this when it first came out. Yeah, 6 months ago, was the diff housing. The two screw mounts were in the wrong place. They're slightly off, but building it up as per the leaving the screws loose seems to have helped. It does seem to be all kind of true at the back. Also having the Willspeed upgrade parts on the rear have kind of dragged it into line, so it shouldn't hopefully give me any issues. Now there's a lot coming for Noob Goes Racing. Not only are we going to be racing the latest and greatest B7, but in the background I've also been looking into see whether you could go out for a lot less money and build yourself a really good racing buggy. And that's exactly what I've done. Now it's obviously, if you've got all the money to throw at this kind of hobby, you certainly can spend it. But what happens if you have a limited budget? So the idea is, do you go and buy a ready to run off the shelf racing buggy, or do you go and look second hand? And that's exactly what I've done. I've got two buggies here for two different budgets. One very entry level budget, which is the Schumacher LD laydown, and I have a LD3 that are both going to be on the channel, where I go through all the costs and all the electronics and try and keep them to a reasonable price point, and then we will take them to the track and race them to see how they get on. So if you're interested in that and also seeing the B7 go around the track, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.